Hey everyone, I got a special guest here today. Today's guest is going to be a game changer. I'm sitting down with Dr. Mark Sherwood, the mastermind behind the Functional Medical Institute. He's one of the original pioneers of the biohacking movement, from being a SWAT officer to transforming lives through functional medicine. He's here to share his expertise on optimizing longevity, reversing aging, and how you can take control of your health today. Mark, we're so excited to have you on the hashtag Clockedin podcast. What caused you to change your life from this SWAT dangerous life to the life of helping everyone with health? How did that change
Well,
occur?
yeah, I appreciate you having me, first of all, Jordan. It's an honor to be here with you. The transition, it seems a little bit odd, but you get right into it, it really wasn't, because, from the mission of protection and service to mankind as a law enforcement officer, and then transitioning to protection and service for mankind as a naturopathic doctor. And it's really about, it's just a different branded way to do the same thing. I'm really trying to protect people from themselves,
Yes,
the unknown, maybe lack of information, and then to serve them by giving them information in a loving, kind, direct manner.
absolutely. Absolutely. And how has that been for you, going from the day-to-day of the SWAT to business ownership, entrepreneurship? How's that transition been? Because I know there's a lot of people sitting there going, I would love to make a change. How do I make a change in my own life?
Well, you can. First of all, I've always been one of those persons who has always been curious about what could be done, or
Yes.
curious about solving what is perceived impossibilities. One of the perceived impossibilities I think we have is, can I change careers? Can I reinvent myself? Can I do other things? And the answer is, undoubtedly yes, you can. You just have to realize that if you start defining yourself, whoever you are, by your initial job, and that becomes your brand, or that becomes your logo or your business card, you're probably already off, because all of us as creative human beings have great things, greatness to offer the world. It's just a matter of understanding who we are and what drives us, what's your passion, and then let that passion kind of begin to dream a little bit. Let it become something of a vision guide, if you will, and that can direct you into these areas that you probably never thought of. And then look at them honestly, evaluate them. Is this something that I can achieve, and get some wise counsel on that? I think that's always a big deal. And then go for it. I mean, I think that's the word of the day. Go for it. Don't let fear stop you from what you should be doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as we were talking about a little bit before, we're constantly in this age of opportunity left, opportunity right, and everyone's like focus, focus, focus. So
Yeah.
it's such a challenging dynamic because we don't know what's actually going to come. And I think it really comes from the hours that we're not at our job, but the hours where we start to create, oh, wouldn't that be fun? And then you take a small sample size and try it out. And you go, okay, I want to do a little bit more. That's how I like to think about things, because I think everyone thinks it's so this or that. And there's a lot of and in our world nowadays.
Yeah, I'd say so. One thing I did learn from law enforcement, especially the world of SWAT, if you will, is if you define a goal, or what you're trying to achieve, or your mission success, what does that look like? And you kind of got to work backwards, like, what is the goal out here, and then work backwards. Well, what if that's the goal? What can I do to achieve it? And it may sound a little bit non-exemplary, but it really is exemplary when I use this analogy. Is that when I was on the entry team of SWAT, when you go into a building on some sort of an operation, whether it be a warrant service or a hostage rescue or something like that, well, you've got to be so locked in to the target ahead that even if somebody goes down around you, you're taught to step over them and keep going forward. And that's a hard thing to catch, because we tend to get distracted by things that might go a little bit wrong. And you can't do that, because when you do that, you compromise the whole mission. And in that analogy, you might even endanger other people as well. Now, I'm not saying this is a life and death thing. I'm just saying that there's a lot of parallels to the thought process.
100%. I mean, it's you could even compare that to you're working on a project and then you get a different opportunity and now you're thinking
Yeah.
about that opportunity. Or, as many of us know, maybe there's some drama going on in our family's lives or our parents' lives or someone's life, and it starts to encompass them. And you forget about your own life. And you see this happen so often. And that's why I say to a lot of people is like, you didn't choose your parents, you didn't choose your siblings. So, I mean, you really have a decision to make whether you want how you want that relationship to be. I would hope that everyone wanted to be close, but sometimes that's not always the best for us, as we've seen.
Compartmentalization, that concept is key. While you're working on this, be this. While you're working on that, be that. While you're working on this, do that, etc. And it's like I teach the staff here where I'm at the Functional Medical Institute in Tulsa that if you're going down the hallway, and I use this analogy all the time, it may sound childish, but it really does paint a good picture. If you're going down the hallway to drop off information to the fax machine or drop off information to the doctor that you need to communicate now, and you see a piece of paper sitting on the ground that's on your right, first go drop off the information, get it done, and then when you're done with that, go back and pick up the piece of paper. In other words, you're still accomplishing both, but which one is the most critical? What is mission urgent? And it's like delivering the information. That's what you're called to do. It's like if you're going to walk down the hallway to grab something off the coffee machine to go give it back to the doctor, and you see a paperclip on the ground. Don't get distracted by the shiny ball or the shiny glow of that. Drop the information off and then go get it. Because if you start getting all spread out and you're really distracted, you really can't accomplish anything. And we all know about multitasking or having that mentality. It's really a lack of attention to detail a lot of times.
I I completely agree, and I actually really enjoy that example because there's so many times where I'm coaching people and we'll sit there and they're like, "Well, I have my one thing that I work on, and then the rest of my time is allocated to this." And I've explained to them, I'm like, if you just spent 3 hours a day of uninterrupted time,
Yeah.
you would probably get more done than in the 7 hours that you're like, I'm working the whole time. Because I'm like, you're just not. Like, that's just not possible to be able to do both and think about both. And it's the pure focus is where you get things done. And even little tasks like that, it's like you get to the gym, you get out of the car, and you go in the gym. Like I was talking to some people yesterday, and they're like, "Yeah, I hung out in the car for 20 minutes before the gym. Why? Like these are areas that you can just capitalize and go get your time back, go claim your time back. And yes, if you want to go scroll on your phone or do whatever, just do it on your couch. Allocate the time for that activity too, because it's not like one activity is right or wrong. It's just you just don't do these activities outside of the order that they're supposed to be done.
Even at the gym this morning, actually, great example. I had this epiphany. I've had it before, but I just saw it again today as I was thinking about our time together. That people come in the gym where I exercise, and I see them sitting on a machine. I mean, like draped on the machine, just like look like almost some laundry sitting on the machine and not doing anything but sitting on their cell phones. And I thought, why are you here? I'm not talking 10 seconds, 30 seconds. I'm talking 5 minutes plus because by the time they have scrolled there and did the next set, I'm already 3 sets deep in this thing. And I don't like to waste my time. I didn't go in the gym to talk to anybody, socialize, fellowship, uh, give advice to anybody. I mean, I'll be friendly, but I'm there to go to work. And when I'm done
Yeah.
with that, I'll take off my headphones, take off my weightlifting gloves, put my workout notebook away, change clothes, and then I'm going to work. And I really stay that focused and locked in. And I think it's a lesson that people need to really start considering putting into place. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy if you're used to having, and I don't believe in ADD, ADHD, but that whole attention inability that you feel like, or that maybe you've been told by some quack doctor somewhere that says do this because it becomes an excuse. I think that we all have the ability to give great attention to detail, but it's a matter of training. It's a matter of probably unlearning some behaviors.
Yeah, for me, it's always been. The hardest part about anything is that everything's a muscle. Everything we build up tolerance, and the more tolerance we have, the more we can get done. So
Yeah.
what I mean by that is exactly what you're saying. Hey, we're going to go through a workout and we're not going to scroll every single app. We're not going to do these activities. We're just going to sit here and just work out. Like I remember a couple weeks ago I lost my headphones on a flight. And I didn't get new headphones for like a month. And in that
Oh,
month I was at the gym and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not distracted. Because when I wear my headphones, I'm like listening to like a YouTube thing or like just prepping for different stuff. And I'm like, my mind's not into it. And that's fine if you're on the Stairmaster, but it's different when you're going for like a max bench or a squat. Like you need to get in the zone. So it's just this idea of how do you build focus? So for you, I know you're doing a bunch of different activities. How do you build focus for the audience?
well, I have a schedule. A lot of people don't have a schedule. And if you don't have a schedule, you won't be scheduled. If you don't have a plan, you have no plan. And so,
Yes.
you mentioned blocking out time. It every moment of a day is blocked out. And so, like you mentioned, what can you achieve with great focus? And it's interesting because this year alone, we've been able to construct 3 books, and it was a quite an endeavor. But the only way to get that done was to set extreme focus on blocks of windows of times to where that's what we were doing, and that's it. And it's just research, 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 putting it together, writing it, looking at it, writing it, you know, redefining it, looking for grammatical errors and content stuff. Does it flow? And that you can accomplish a lot more by that type of structure and planning and scheduling than you can just haphazard.
And do you put time constraints? I mean, obviously you have the time constraints, but is it like, hey, we're writing one chapter of the book, or is it more of, hey, we're just going to write for 10 pages and we see what happens? Which one is it more of?
Probably the time constraint, I would say. I've got a goal. I'm going to write one chapter and I want that to be done in 2 hours or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'll stay to it, and if I finish early, I'm good, and if I don't finish early, I'm going to go to the end. And if I reach the end and it's not done, well, okay, maybe I need to schedule another time to finish chapter 1 in that example. But I try to stay locked in because if you get off schedule,
Yeah.
it's just going to be a domino effect and something's going to get left out. Something's going to get dropped as far as the attention you need to give to us. Like when I'm dealing with clients or patients, whatever you want to call them, they're going to get my undivided attention. And I've said this to many people, thousands of people. At that moment in time, they're the most important person in the world right now to me. And I'm going to show them that. And if I can't show them my care and show them that attention, why would they care what I think? So
Yes.
then I think it's probably just showing them some intentional love, if you will. And
Yeah.
it's not just a person, it might be intentional love to a project or a vision you have.
Yeah. And it's absolutely, it's really hard to do the planning and action. So, like, when I look at my life, you have to plan your life and then you have to take action.
Yeah.
The hard part is when do you plan and when do you take that action? Because you're sitting
Yeah.
there constantly thinking about different variables, thinking about the future, thinking about where we're at currently. And it's how do we plan that time in? So for you, what is the best time to plan for yourself? And then when do you, obviously you're executing most of the day, but how do you think about the planning in?
Well, like I start with scheduling, like with scheduling clients. I mean, those things are scheduled out there 3 or 4 months. I mean, that's
Okay.
there, that's that angle. But as far as the rest of it goes, I look at it like usually at the beginning of the week or 2 weeks before, and I say, okay, here's how I'm going to do this, and I start putting it on the schedule. And so the schedule blends with perhaps different businesses we have. I'm going to work on this, work on that, because things can blend together, and you can't allow that to happen when you're working on a schedule. Now,
Yes,
everything does connect. There's no question. It's got to have a good flow to it. It's got to serve the good purpose interconnectedly and interrelatedly. But ultimately, it's about staying focused and locked in to achieve the attention in each area that needs it with full capability instead of just partially.
absolutely. And I see that you're wearing a bracelet.
Yeah,
What's going on with the bracelet?
I've given these out for years. This is called a Hope Dealer bracelet.
A hope dealer. What's a hope dealer?
Well, like we all know what a dope dealer is. They sort of get you something to get you hooked into perhaps a drug,
Yeah.
right? Becomes very addictive. Well, if you flip the script, that's a negative addiction. But what if you could become addicted to giving hope, to just
Okay.
feeling that out that costs nothing for people? And what if that became the new contagion in our world? Hope. Hope is what drives a person. If people don't have hope, they don't really have a reason to live. What is the hope? It's like
Yeah.
hope for this, hope for that, hope that this will occur, hope that I will achieve this, or whatever the case may be, hope that I will become a great husband, hope for a lady I'll become a great, wife, the hope that I'll have family, the hope that I'll develop my business, that is what drives the human. And without hope, people really have nothing. Their heart is empty. And so, the lack of hope is hopelessness. And I
Yeah.
think people just hear that word and they're like, wow, that's kind of a downer. Well, I'm not saying we won't have issues and troubles and trials along the way, but if you can hang on to hope, it gives you a chance for another day.
Yeah. And how hope can be shown in so many different ways and it can be so easy. So like when I think of that, I went on a run on Saturday morning and when I run to distract myself a little bit, I wave at each person and I say good morning. Sometimes I get a morning back, sometimes I get a blank face, sometimes I get a nothing.
Yeah.
But my thought on it was if that person's having a really hard morning, if you just get one person to say hi to them, and it's not even we're having a conversation, it's just morning, morning, like just that neighborly environment,
Yeah.
you're getting that hope energy. You know what I mean? That like there are nice people out here. Someone will help me. This is good.
There is, and you mentioned the hope. You're getting the hope energy. What happens with this when you give encouragement, when you are imparting or infusing someone else with courage, the magic happens because as you give, it spins back around and goes within you deep. And the same is true with hope. You give hope, you infuse someone with hope, you encourage them with hope. Well, that hope comes back to you multiple times over in your life. And so it really is this multiplying principle of what you give, you will get. And the same is true with anger or angst or something like that. It doesn't matter what you give, you're going to get that back. And so, hope is something that we're going to keep doing. And these bracelets, I usually wear two, but I gave one away recently. We were at the restaurant and the waitress comes up and she was great. I mean, great. We've had her before at this one particular place we go to, and she just started talking and she commented on the bracelets. And she goes, "Oh, well, that's cool." And I said, "Well, here you go." And she goes, "Oh, you don't have." I said, "It's fine. That's what I like to do. I like to give those out." She goes, "Oh, I love this." And so even that moment in time for her, you never know what someone else is going through. You never
A
know
hundred.
what
Yes.
they're struggling with or not struggling with. You never know what they need. And then she says these words, I really needed this today.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, that's cool. And then, one more quick story. We were in the islands of Aruba, you know, a few years
Yeah.
ago, and there was a waiter there named Gregory. And he just seemed like a nice, young guy. And I just tried to encourage him. And he had a good time and we tipped him well, and then I gave him one of those bracelets. And we went back about, I don't know, 2 years later, there's Gregory again. And he comes up and has this story. And the story was so touching, and I'll just keep it the very short
Yeah.
version here for the sake of brevity. But so he comes up and he goes, "You got to see this." He goes, "This is my wife's mother or my mother-in-law. Her name is Gregoria."
Yeah.
He goes, "You got to see this." I guess she was in a coma, so she'd really had a struggle medically, and the picture of with him kneeling by her bed praying for her. And he goes, "Look." And he was wearing that bracelet. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow. And he goes, "I believe that hope got her through. And she came out of the coma and she lived a whole nother year, which was
Wow.
fascinating. And so he goes, "I want you to know that I appreciate that." So you never know what that can mean for somebody else. And that was just one example. And I'm not saying that because I'm good or anything. That's not the point. The point is, every one of us listening to this podcast, everyone in the sound of my voice can become a hope dealer. It costs nothing,
Y-
but returns everything.
I was just gonna say that. So first off, thank you for sharing that because you start to realize that if you give a bigger tip, cool, it's a monetary tip. The bracelets are probably like, you know what I mean, minimal cost on them. And it makes such a difference. Like one of the things I've really been enjoying doing with my clients recently is just sending them books. Like
Yeah,
sending them random books. And it doesn't cost much, but it's that element of surprise. Like, no, you didn't just did you actually do that? Like I went to a hotel last weekend for my wife's birthday. This guy gives me his hat. I go, why are you giving me your hat? He's like, because the sun. Like you got to be protected. And it was his business. He's like, dude, I always give hats away. Yeah, and he's just like, it is what it is. And now we're talking about it. But the whole idea here is that we're talking about hope dealing. And at your business, you have 8 areas. 4 are controllable, 4 are uncontrollable. So what are some of those areas? And then like what are maybe some just we want to give people hope in regard to the body because the body people think, oh, I can only live to 77. After talking to Dr. Mark, I might be I might be living a little longer. So tell us a little bit about that.
the expectation we have probably in America is not accurate, and hopefully this will blow up somebody's assertions of that today because we need to change it. Remember, if the expectation is for you to jump this high, what can you achieve once you jump that high? Nothing. What's the point? So we've set our bar too low, and the bar always needs to be so high that we can't do it without some kind of internal strength or internal health help or internal hope to drive us. Now, with that said, you mentioned the 8 areas that we deal with. 4 we have control over is nutrition, sleep, stress management, and movement or exercise. People say, "Well, I don't have control." Yeah, you do. You have control over what you put in your mouth, what you put in your head, what you put in your heart, what you put in your ears. You have complete control over that. So don't say you don't. And then certainly we have a control over the decision on when we go to bed. We do. And we can say, I've got too much to do. No, you don't, because you can't take time away from one of the greatest times of recovery, rehabilitation, regeneration, which is sleeping, right? And it's not mean we sleep all day. That's not the point, but we need our adequate sleep to do recovery to prepare us for what we're going to do the next day. And stress management is a no-brainer in a sense that I like to define stress a different way than most do. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't like the definition of stress as a noun. I do not believe it's a noun by very definition of a noun. It's not a person, place, or thing, although there are person, place, and things that can give us opportunity to react, respond in a way. But stress is a verb. It's an action or decision that you take or make in response to life's expected or unexpected occurrences. And if it's an action, that means you have a choice. It becomes a verb. And so that verb action then becomes something you have control over. So those are the 4 areas we have control over to optimize life. And then we don't have control over. We need to find someone to help us understanding our own unique genetics, understanding our own unique hormone presence or these chemical messengers, which we do, and then utilizing peptides, utilizing supplements properly as they fit into this whole approach we're talking about of complete lifestyle adjustment.
Absolutely. And the part you brought up about stress, I really enjoy that because all I had going through my head was people going, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. And that's you identifying as something.
Right.
And a lot of us don't identify as I'm happy. I don't ever hear you saying that. And that concerns me. That
Yeah.
concerns me. So if you're listening to this, I really hope you start thinking about that when you go, I am anxious or I am depressed. Start using the words of I am happy, I'm excited, I'm pumped. And don't one side this. Like you're literally negative siding it and you're taking a verb, as you said, or a feeling and you're making it your identity, which just is not true. So I
When
think that's
feelings
super
lead the
important.
way, we got a problem. You
What'd
know,
you say?
when feelings lead the way, we've got a problem. We need to be very cautious of that and cautious of identifying, as you said. I echo that statement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So run us through, because I think most people might know about some of the controllables, but like what's going on with some of these uncontrollables? What is going on with all these? Yeah.
Well, a lot of times we feel like that we just, for example, are given a set of bad genes or whatever. That is not an accurate statement. The conventional thought process has done us a disservice. Frankly, it's lied to us because the genetics have changed a whopping 2% in 10,000 years.
Oh wow.
Based upon that, we can say that they're not the problem because you go back 200 years, you didn't have the type 2 diabetes and all the Alzheimer's, dementia, cancers and autoimmune conditions, et cetera. Now, the naysayers out there that have probably are part of the problem would say, well, you don't understand, Mark, because people are living longer now, and so the longer you live, the more diagnosis opportunity you have, and also we're getting better at diagnosis. Fine, granted. However, you go back and look at 700 or 800 years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, people were living longer than they are now. So we've had this curve of a dip, and I think the dip occurred probably back in the 1800s as the world spread out and as sanitation became an issue, and we didn't have the current antibiotic therapy. I know people have mixed about that, but there was some blessing there in that. We didn't have the diagnostic capability and the tools that we have now, so people are living longer again, but we're not living longer than we had before. And
Yeah.
so because of that, my statement goes, well, it's not the genes because the genes can't cause the problem. They are made to give you insight as to how to correct the problem. So the answer really lies in the environmental focus then. And so environment actually interacts with the genes to create this epigenetic response. And that becomes the driving point. Might be looking at it like this. The genes are like a dam in a river, and the river's downstream of what's happening in your life. Well, what
Yeah.
is the cause of flood? Is that the dam's fault? No, it's not the dam's fault. It's the reservoir's fault because the
Yeah.
reservoir came up too high. And this is where we have a lot of things controllable in our sense to understand how your dam slash genes work. And if you
Yeah.
understand that, then you know how to work the environment or the reservoir behind it to create a necessary flow down here, which is metabolism. So that's just one example of understanding how things fit together. And when you do that, it's a pretty smooth process. And of course, that's kind of our specialty, I would say, to link all this together.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, I've done over 250 podcasts. I've done a bunch of different stuff. Usually people touch on a topic or two, not encompassing all eight of them, because that,
Yeah.
that does make a big difference. So if you were to dive in a little bit more, what's going on with the hormones, the peptides, supplements? Because I know those are probably the ones where people are like, even me, I'm like, I don't, like, I hear the words, but I don't know what those mean. Like, I'm not really sure. What does that mean?
Well, let's start with supplements and kind of work backwards there. So supplements should supplement what a diet is not granting you or giving you. Now, our diet has been, if you're eating well, meaning eating foods from the natural sourcing as opposed to not eating well, meaning eating foods that are processed, full of preservatives, chemicals, et cetera. The standard American Western diet. You can't out supplement that away. You can't out pray that away. You can't pill it away. You can't hormone it away. So forget it. You got to fix that, right? But when you eat well, because of the overprocessing of the earth and the processing of foods, you're still going to be short in certain nutrients. And we need to bring in the certain micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids at that point to complement, to give us a total picture of the nutrients we need to drive our systems. And so that's where supplementation fits in. And generally speaking, I see people deficient in D, deficient in omega 3s, deficient in some B vitamins, magnesium. Very common out there. So I will always start at those basics. And so we've got to fight against the FOMO stuff out here that says, if you don't take the supplement, you may. Well, that's a lie, and that's a sales technique. And
Yeah.
so understanding that there's a lot of charlatans out here, I call them, they're just selling you snake oil. And it may not be snake oil per se that does nothing, but the application of same is not accurate as it fits into this totality of the circumstances here, right? And so then you move forward into peptides. Peptides are not something mysterious. They are just chains of amino acids that the body already makes. So we already know amino acids are natural to the body. There are essential and there are non-essential ones. So this takes the structures of these amino acids and it just mimics what the body does. When you take in peptides, which are strands of amino acids less than 50, they actually do all kinds of really cool things like help you repair your vascular system, muscles, joints, tissues, brain, immune system responsiveness, mitochondria, et cetera. So you can actually have more presence of these things later in life, therefore becoming younger in functionality or organ system functionality. And then you move to hormones. Hormones are out here bigger chains of amino acids, more than 100, and they carry messages. So they're like emails, and they're all sent from your master control center up here, the pituitary gland. And so the pituitary gland sends these emails around. And so look at the body like a corporation, the pituitary being the CEO. If the CEO can't communicate to the divisions, we have a problem. And so
Yeah.
hormones then are like communication devices from the CEO, pituitary, to a system with instructions to carry out. And the instructions is important. They can't be carried out unless the cells have proper micronutrients and oxygen. So it goes right back to that same thing, and everything intertwines. And so hormones are becoming more of a player today, Jordan, because we're seeing men get into their 30s and 40s that have lower testosterone than we've had in the last 700 or 70 years. And the ladies are reaching menopause faster or perimenopause faster because of the same problems. And so it's important to keep that in mind to get those things back to more youthful levels, because it has been shown time and time again that people with more youthful levels of hormones do live longer.
Wow. I was taking notes actually. I
Yeah.
don't usually take notes during the pod. I'm typing this out because I'm sitting here and I'm like, I've never heard it like that. It's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. And when you sit there and you start to think about it, what would help people mostly? Like when should they come and start looking at these things? Is it at 18? Is it at 25? Is it at 40? Is it at 60? When do people start thinking about this? Or when
Man, right now, because ultimately it's the information we have today is bountiful and plentiful. It
yeah.
really is. There's stuff out there everywhere. What is not out there everywhere is how do you sort that out and put it all together? As you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of information about certain topics, but the disconnect occurs because of the lack of connection of all these things. So we've talked about those 8 areas of life. And again, we have kind of been some thought leaders out there, and this is what we're doing obviously is not working because
Yeah.
health is not where it should be. America, as a matter of fact, is in the worst health position that it's ever been in the history of mankind's existence right now. And it really is, it's the most poor health. From all the industrialized nations, we spend more per capita at $10,000 per family per year
Wow.
as opposed to other countries, but we get less return. So of all the industrialized nations, we're near the bottom in return. So
Yeah.
you're spending more for this thing called healthcare and getting less health. So that tells me that healthcare does not care about your health. And
Yes.
so I'm like looking at this, and if that was a business, that business has been failing for a number of years. It's time to change things around. It's like looking at the United States government in a sense. They tell you that you should be saving money, but yet they're trillions of dollars in debt. So you got to look at it and go, okay, if leadership tells you to do something that obviously does not work as per their own data,
Yeah.
probably time to look for new leadership. And in our
Essentially, yeah.
world, I think a human being today, because of the validity and because of the availability of information, has the ability then to sort that out, analyze that, put that together in a nice wisdom manner, and then execute a plan to make
Yes.
it work. And people like us, yeah, we're few and far between. But the more persons that get that together, like Jordan, for example, the better you get this together, the more your people in your insurance, in your influence base gets it too, because a teacher is only a good teacher if he teaches well enough for the student to become a teacher. And so
Yes.
we've taken that mentality on the last, 15 years and try to become that.
Absolutely. Because you start to realize that everyone can learn. So,
Yeah.
what are a few of the controllables that people can increase if they wanted to take action right now, today? What are some of the things? I know you mentioned about nutrition, getting the whole foods. Is there anything in regard to the sleep or the other areas?
Yes, with sleep. There's some sleep hygiene protocols that I say people need to have. First of all, you need 7 to 8 hours, period, regardless of your age. If you're younger, obviously,
Yeah.
might need more because we're growing, right? But sleep protocols, meaning you got to control the light. It's got to be dark. The temperature, it's got to be fairly cold. So the temperature needs to be probably somewhere around 65 to 67. The noise is a big thing, certainly. And so lighting is big from the standpoint of not just dark, but even if you have night lights need to be either yellow or red as opposed to white or blue, because the white or blue light is going to magnify like the sun. I mean, the blue light that emits from the screens, our cell phones, and the television is equivalent of 5,500 Kelvin, give or take, which is like the noonday sun. So it drives
Oh wow.
cortisol at night. So, and don't be afraid to get some of these, when you're watching TV or something. I just on my desk here, these are blue blocker glasses, right?
Yeah.
And you can get those and they work quite well to block out the blue. And then obviously don't be afraid to, do a cold plunge or something like that before bed to calm the body down a bit. And so those are good street sleep protocols as far as what people can take. Magnesium works outstanding.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and then you look at, for example, like stress management. I tell
Yeah.
people to one, define it as a verb, obviously analyze the situation, but work on breathing, pushing the breath downward, like diaphragmatic breathing. I learned that, actually when I was on the SWAT team, pointing a sniper rifle at somebody, you better be calm. You better keep your heart rate down. You better keep cortisol down so you can make good decisions and not become very overly reactive, right? So breathing becomes a very important thing, pushing the breath down. So when you inhale, the abdomen comes out and the upper
Yes.
body doesn't move. And so those are things that people can do from exercise. It's super easy. If you're not moving today, the first thing to do is create these short goals that are like failure proof. In other words, this week I'm going to walk 30 minutes total for the week. And so what does that mean? 5 minutes a day? Yeah, 5 minutes a day. And you've succeeded your goal and got it overdone by 5 minutes. So it's like start somewhere. Make it
I
failure proof. Do not set these on daily goals, but set them on weekly goals, which makes it more achievable.
100%. And even with the exercise one, we recently bought a walking treadmill. These things are like $100 on Amazon.
Yeah.
You can walk with them. And like even my wife on Saturday morning, I went on the run. She's like, I don't want to walk outside. We're Florida. It's kind of hot. She's
Yep.
like, I'm just gonna walk on the treadmill for 2 miles. And I'm like, that's great. You don't sweat, nothing happens. Like it's just good for you though. We don't do that enough and we don't realize how to get our body in motion. I think one of the biggest travesties with that, and we'll dive into the five pillars a little bit more, but I think the biggest challenge with that is that everyone's like, oh, you only need to work out 3 days a week. And it's like, no. Like, how can anyone build a habit on 3 days a week? Like, you just can't. And it's hard to do something 3 days a week. So it's like, just do it all seven and you'll feel better. Like, even if it's a walk, a long walk or something, like the more consistency, because to build the habits is the hardest part. So it's how do you stay consistent? But with Edwards Consulting, we have five pillars: mental health, physical health, community service, philanthropy, spirituality, and relationships. And we've been asking each guest where they're at and how it kind of helps them. So for you, Mark, what is your mental health like on a 1 to 10 today?
Well, for me, I mean, I think everybody's got room for growth.
Absolutely.
I would give myself probably an 8 because to give
Okay.
myself a 10 would be overly arrogant to say I've got it all figured out. No, there's days, Jordan, where I'm like, this is not very fun, or I'm having a hard time, or I'm dealing with life, or dealing with family stuff, or dealing with this or that. And it's going to happen. And so I'm always looking at this from the standpoint of what can I do better to keep my emotions not suppressed, because I think emotions are beautiful. I think it's okay to get angry. It's okay to get sad. It's okay to get happy. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to cry, but they can't become the controlling forces of one's life. And so
Yeah.
I think there's always room for growth in that, and as everything else. And I try to like be an example in that while sharing, even within some painful moments from time to
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. And you start to realize, I think the biggest thing that I took from that is that it's okay to feel all these emotions and you don't always have to be super stoic,
Right.
as a lot of men are because they're like, I'm the leader of the family. And it's like, no, it's okay. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to be whatever feeling you have.
Yeah,
Because if we don't go through the range, then we limit the range on the upside too.
we do. And I'm not one. I've learned in my adult life here as I've grown older that men should learn to cry more. They should
Yeah.
learn to laugh more. And it doesn't indicate a weakness. It actually is quite the opposite. It indicates strength. And when you show vulnerability, you expose yourself, you expose the humanity that is. And I think it builds a great bridge to connectivity and community when people see that, because they realize that I can trust this person because they hurt sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, in regard to physical health, I mean, you're looking good. What is your physical health on a 1 to 10? What do you feel on that?
Well, I'd probably go 8 or 9 again. I realize that being in my 60s, I'm a little unique. I realize that, and I feel really blessed. But
Yeah,
I've worked really hard, and I'm not content in an unhealthy status. I'm always trying to improve. I'm always
yeah,
trying to do better. There's always opportunity to improve. You're never going to arrive. You just won't arrive. And so it's
yeah.
going through the life journey of, physical health. I'm going to exercise every day, and I do. I don't take a day off. I don't believe that. I think that the only day you don't move is the day you're dead. And movement is life, and lack of movement is rigor mortis. So I really
Yes.
think that we need to move. So again, I don't never say that I've achieved it all. I can always do better, and maybe that's better just with where I'm at now is preserving capital. Preserving capital of my physical health.
So
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna kind of bring up is a lot of people don't realize, but it's not, let's say Mark's original goal, because when a lot of people are working out, their original goal is I can bench the most weight. You start to change the parameters, which leads to
yeah,
different key performance indicators. So now it's not, hey, I'm not working out to be the strongest guy. I'm working out for longevity. And longevity
right.
means I just have to maintain my muscle, which means that I don't have to break it and risk injuring myself where for 6 months I might not be able to lift anything. So that becomes an awareness piece that a lot
Yeah,
of people don't realize because it takes a lot of time to redefine what this new version of yourself is. But I think that's why it's so important.
100%. Like when I'm looking at my training regimen, I write it down, I have a plan, but I don't go for the maximum repetitions ever again. I don't, because I realize that's probably ego talking. And
Yes.
my tendons, the tensegrity of my tendons and things like that are not what they once were. So I have to shift that lower end of repetition range probably to between 6 and 8 and not go below that, because it becomes something of a foolish endeavor at that point. But even within that higher repetition range, I can still get stronger within that.
Of course.
Really can. And I articulate that in my documentation. So I'll use this. That might be my lower end, 6 to 10, and my medium end might be 15 to 17, and my upper end might be more than 20. And there's days where I will do that. So I will alternate those styles between week to week so that I'm not just training perhaps fast twitch muscles only, and I'm getting into slow twitch.
Yeah. It's super important. It's super important. So I appreciate that. The next one's an interesting one. Some people are in it, some people aren't. Community service. On a 1 to 10, how do you feel about that?
I think it's just it's giving back. I
Yes.
mean, Jordan, we've done um, Nights of Empowerments here as a 3 or 4 annual type of events where
Yeah.
we bring in the community. We rent out a ballroom at a nice hotel in the Tulsa area and feed people and present them with something, someone. Sometimes we'll bring in speakers, sometimes we won't, sometimes we'll do it just ourselves, but those are giving back to our community. And I think giving back like that with, and this is kind of key, without expecting something in return is probably a key thing, and so when you give like that, community service, whether actions or monetary things or your giftings, your hands are open, like you're giving. And I've learned that if you keep your hands open to give, your hands are open also to receive. And the more
Yes.
you receive, you give, and receive, you give. And so you don't hang on to this thing called finances with intent to just build a bigger barn or build a bigger house. You
Yeah.
have to be wise enough to not give it all away, but wise enough also at the same time to not hold on to it.
Yes, absolutely. And I have a recently new client. He basically does fitness coaching. And he
Mhm.
was telling me about how he wanted to get back to a rehab center because he started getting into
Yeah.
he's been clean for a number of years and he was like, I should do this. I'm like, that's interesting. And then he's like, yeah, like I'm just not making the money, so I can't donate to them. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. And I go, dude, what helped you get through rehab? And he goes, my physical fitness. And I go, great. Why don't you
Yeah.
teach a workout class? And then he goes, calls the guy, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then he started to realize that the guy's like, yeah, you should pitch all your businesses. Pitch all the stuff you do to these guys because they need it. And he
They
was
do.
like, oh my God, now I have a lead source and I'm related to them. And like we both had the same challenges. I was like, yeah, bro, like you just got to put yourself out there with the resources and the things you have because it's more valuable. Like you handing out those hope dealer things are probably more valuable than writing these people donations. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's so much more. It gives so much more. So there's two more pillars. We're almost there. Relationships. Wh-
Yeah, my primary relationship is for me it's God. So I am a person of faith. Now I don't push my beliefs on anybody else. I just express love towards everyone, so people can believe what they want. And then right behind that's my wife. There's not a week that goes by that I don't have a date night with her. And I don't
Okay.
know how busy we are. I think that's very important. So the prioritization of relationships is spending time with those priorities in those relationships. And so I think that's really important. And so I'm big on that. And I really think it's good to understand this principle with your relationships. There are people that you let in close to you, but they need to fit on this hand. Like in other words, you don't have a responsibility to open your whole life up to everybody. You just don't. Sometimes we're told, well, the more open and honest you are, the better that is. But people will run over that and they
Yeah.
can't handle that. And they're not supposed to handle that. So if they're not supposed to handle something, why are you giving it to them? Why are you giving them more than they're supposed to? And it doesn't allow for proper concentric circles of relationships. There's sometimes people are close, you're three or four close friends. And then it gets outside of that a little bit closer, but not quite as close. And then it goes out. So the relationship circles, if you will, it is really important to clearly define. And don't spread yourself too thin with relationships because those relationships are not meant to be that close to some of those people. Some people you love from a further distance than you do others.
I think that's so important. And the other big thing is you don't always have to share, like you were saying. And sometimes a vulnerable share might be like, I was telling people that you were coming on the podcast. That's a vulnerable share. It's not really vulnerable, but it's like, hey, you guys are going to see it, but it's a good conversation starter. So it's how do you be vulnerable without like really sharing everything? And some people need some help with that. Absolutely. The last pillar is spirituality. So when did you start getting into that? And has that always been something present in your life?
Um, Probably, I live in the Midwest, it's the old perpetual defined Bible Belt. And so
Absolutely.
I was raised, said this to people before, I've never had a drug problem, but I did have a drug problem because I was drugged to church all the time, and so it was just there all the time. And I really wanted to understand what it all meant, and early on in life, I was curious, who made the world? Who made
Yeah.
me? How am I made? How does this all work, man? It takes a lot of faith to believe that two rocks collided one day and became an amoeba, and the amoeba eventually swam around the water that was just kind of just showed up too, and the amoeba eventually grew legs, and the amoeba was able to swim through the water and grow legs and get on the land. The land then became something the amoeba walked on and became a worm, and then the worm eventually grew some hair and climbed a tree, and the person in the tree became one day decided to shave the hair and get a lunch pail and go to work. That's a story that
Yeah.
it just didn't make any sense. And I wanted to understand creation and, humanity and just people better. And I just started asking myself these questions. And, I always believe in the principle, if you seek truth, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Looking. And so for me, it was a perpetual endeavor, just looking for truth. And am I still curious about things? Yeah. I am. I don't think I've got it figured out because life is not a straight line. And
Yeah.
so I'm still looking, I'm still trying to define, what life looks like. I'm still working on my spirituality, the essence of who I am to understand better.
Absolutely. I love that because it makes it more of a journey and it's not like you have to do this or that, but it's you can find it wherever you want to find it and whatever's best for you. So
Right.
we're getting to the end. Where can people learn more? No, before we do that one, no, this was a really interesting one. We talked about our organs in the pre-call. How
Yeah.
long should organs be living for? And then we'll close it out.
Yeah, I think that if you look at it from two principles, you have biblical texts, you got as a goal. Some people go, well, I believe the Bible. Okay, fine. If you believe that, the definition there is 120 years.
Yeah.
But if you don't believe that, and you say, well, I don't believe that, I'm going to trust what I know to be quote unquote science. Well, science tells you a story as well. The oldest person that ever lived is a lady named Jean Calment, who lived in, I believe, England, and she lived to 122.
Oh, wow.
Oldest person alive right now at present, the last I checked, as of 2 weeks ago, is living in Japan at 118. So the history tells us a story as well to unravel this mystery. So I believe in both aspects, probably about 120 years. And the analogy is the old car. If you care for a car that was, say, you know, made in 1920, that car, as you get to 2020, 100 years later, it might look the same. It might be a little older comparably, but if you took good care of it, it'll still run. It still looks pretty cool and it increases in value. How about that? Because that car has been through a lot of things, a lot of stories. So I believe humanity's like that too. It increases in value, it increases in wisdom based upon experience. And so I just believe that that's something we need to set our bar high for, and not that we're not going to live that long, but we need to expect the organ system to last that long.
And that makes you start to realize that if you think you're going to die at 80, there might be another 50% more years to go, which
Correct.
now you're planning for a different thing, you're going to get a different result. Absolutely.
That's right.
So, Mark, where can people learn more about you? Where can they learn more about the Institute? And really appreciate the time.
Oh my goodness. Yes, of course. They can go to Sherwood.tv, um, right there. And I think on that homepage, there's a place they can even download a free gift from us. It's a free ebook that is on hope, health, and freedom. And it's a really nice ebook that my wife and I wrote. We've got several, but I like this one a lot because it sort of talks about all these pillars we're talking about, every one of them we mentioned, and gives the practical tips in there. So it's a great handbook to get started on everything. And there's a bunch of resources, books, movies, TV stuff that we've done and still do. So they can get that as well, or people want to work with us, of course they can.
Absolutely. Thank you.